Good evening. I'm Don Fry, President and CEO of the Year Up Baltimore Committee. It's my pleasure to serve as the moderator of this panel discussion this evening. Thank you for getting a microphone. Hope you can hear me up to this point. Again, it's great to be here tonight and talk about the impact to Baltimore by mobilizing the opportunity youth. We have a very distinguished panel with us this evening. Let me just sort of set the stage a little bit just put this in context. Nationwide, more than 5.6 million young people are disconnected. That's about 1 in 7 in the United States. In Maryland alone, the number is about 85,000, or 1 in 10. Opportunity youth are those young adults between the ages of 16 to 24 that neither are in school or are working. In Baltimore City, there are close to 18,000 opportunity youth, 21% of the state's population. Mobilizing those young adults would certainly result in an enormous economic impact for the city's economy and obviously the people of Baltimore. So tonight, the panel that we have before us are going to discuss the need for talent in the industry that they're involved in, plus challenges and collaborations that are needed to put and equip and move those young adults into meaningful careers at livable wages. So let me try, first of all, just start by introducing our panelists. To my immediate left is Roland Selby. Roland, of course, you've met, is the Executive Director for Year Up Baltimore. Next to Roland is Brian Cobb, who's the Chief Technology Officer for Brown Advisory. To Brian's left is Tanya Axelson, who's the Vice President of Global Human Resources at Allegis and Aerotech. To Tanya's left is Calvin Butler, CEO of BGE. To Calvin's left is Jason Perkins Cohen, who's the Director of the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. And to my far left is Scott Simmons, who's the Vice President, Supply Chain Global Strategic Ops with McCormick and Company. So first of all, please join me in thanking them for joining us this evening. We're going to start off by asking Calvin Butler, because BG, of course, has such a prominent role in Baltimore and also the state, and Calvin's very knowledgeable about the business climate in the area, to ask him to sort of define the current climate in the Baltimore business area compared to the rest of the state, and talk a little about human resources and attracting talent. So, Calvin, if you give us a little insight in that.
Thank you, Don. But let me just first begin by saying good evening to everyone. And thank you for being here. If I'd have known I was first, I'd have set my glass of wine down early. But that's all right. That's all right. So it is truly a pleasure to be here to always partner with Year Up. When the question comes to what is the current business climate, Baltimore, let me put it in perspective of where Maryland is. Maryland is one of the most affluent states in the country. And the demographic of Baltimore, the economy is also thriving. But it was a comment made earlier tonight that I think epitomizes where we are. It's a tale of two cities. You have many that are doing very well, but you have a large segment of our society which is struggling. And when we sit back as a committee and we're sitting down here in our harbor and we're looking out of this view, we have young men and women who live blocks away from here who will never understand what a Brown Advisory does or what it is, and will never have the opportunity or feel comfortable enough in taking the opportunity to look out these windows and experience this. So when you sit back and look at the economy, I think it's a good question, but it's a question as, is the economy open to everyone? And I would respectfully submit to you, no, it's not. The economy is there and it's growing and we have opportunity. But what we have to do as a business community is make sure that it's accessible to every young person who desires to work and create an opportunity there. So when I sit back and look at as the CEO of BGE, one of my passions, or my driving passion outside of my job of being the CEO, but who I am is really about partnering with other organizations to drive workforce development, workforce training, providing opportunity for young men and women. And in doing so, and how we get there, is making sure that young people know that opportunities exist, as Mike Hankins said, at a Brown Advisory, at a BGE, at a McCormick, everywhere in here. This is what we're trying to do. So one of the things that we do is partnering with, I see Sonia there, she was there, Sonia Solisas from the Baltimore City Schools, in terms of making sure that we're partnering with the counselors, the principals, saying that we have opportunities for your young people if you open up your doors and allow businesses to come in and provide the adequate training. So Don, bottom line to your question, the economy is strong, but it's very segmented, and we need to continue to break down silos and barriers to make sure it's accessible to everyone, and I think that's where Year Up is most powerful, in creating the storyline and creating the opportunities for these young people to continue to develop.
So Calvin, I'm going to tip you off. I didn't tip you off on the first question, but I'll tip you off. You got the last question, so you can go back and drink your wine again. Let me turn to Scott Simmons. Scott, talk a little bit about, from McCormick's perspective, obviously in manufacturing and a major player you have in manufacturing. Talk about the role that you have in the industry, of what resources you're going after and what barriers you're finding that are presented in this region, in this regional landscape.
Sure. So I may bring a little bit different perspective. I sit on the Maryland Manufacturing Advisory Board that's appointed by the government, and we're a collection of manufacturers, and one of the challenges we have is we're finding that really people don't see manufacturing as a career option. They see it as a dirty job, and they don't really see it as a life-building career. And I think one of our frustrations is we have many people in the organization who've come in and worked their way through the ranks and worked their way into our leadership roles. And so what we're really struggling to do is find people who are willing to come in and build a career in manufacturing, right? So that could start out as entry level, but it could move into a lot of different directions if people are really willing to come in and put the time in and move through the organization into supervisory ranks.
Great. Let me just add to the panelists, if I'll ask the question to one of you, but if anybody wants to add in, just give me a nod and we'll make sure that you get your opportunity as well moving forward. So Jason, let me come to you. Obviously, there's a lot of companies in Baltimore working very hard to bring businesses and bring employees here. You, with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, are certainly looking to help develop people who are career ready for employment. So talk a little bit about the workforce development, what it looks like and feels in Baltimore City, and what you're doing to help attract and retain companies in Baltimore through the efforts that you take on.
Great. Thanks, Don, and great to be with you all tonight with this beautiful building with a beautiful view. So one of the things that we did in terms of attracting businesses to Baltimore is to co-locate job developers with the Baltimore Development Corporation, pull them out of our workforce centers so that when we were pitching to businesses who were thinking of coming to Baltimore or pitching to businesses to make sure that they stayed in Baltimore, that economic development and workforce development went hand in hand. And that wasn't always the way it was done in Baltimore, and hopefully it's clear to everyone here why it's so important. And that approach has been really successful. So I'll be talking to Roland a little later tonight about a business that BDC and MOD together pitched multiple times when they were deciding where to relocate. And they've selected Baltimore. It's in the IT industry. They'll be creating 200 jobs for the city either by the end of the year or early in 2020. And the short version of this pitch is really what Roland said to open up the panel, which is Baltimore has a tremendous amount of talent. They've got young talent, they've got less young talent. But what they're looking for is an opportunity. And when we have programs like Year Up, we can create that opportunity by giving them the skills that they need, both occupational and non-occupational, so that they can make the most of that opportunity and they can help grow our city.
So Roland, let's talk about Year Up. Obviously, it's been a great day for Year Up today already. So we talked about the opportunity youth. We talked about the economic benefit that can have if we mobilize the opportunity. Talk a little bit about what that business case is for mobilizing the opportunity youth, and also talk a little bit about maybe the opportunity cost of unemployment and skill needs that are needed.
Excellent.
So good evening. When we look at the opportunity youth in Baltimore, and opportunity youth are defined by the age of 16 to 24 years old. We served 18 to 24-year-old that have a high school diploma or their GED, as well as they're currently not enrolled in college. The opportunity youth in Baltimore City is 19,000 students. The opportunity youth in the greater Baltimore metropolitan area is 42,000. So if we just were able to touch 5%, that would be 21,000 students. Our average salary for our alumni is like $20. So the quick behind, on the back of the envelope, we came up with just about $16 million would be generated if we were able to touch just 5% of the students that we are considering opportunity youth. And that's giving them the opportunity, that's teaching them the soft skills and the hard skills, making sure that we're opening the doors and helping them navigate the waters once they start their careers. It's identifying what additional ways can we work within the school system or work within industry and teach the non-Year Up direct service model. So there's a lot of different services that we can provide to help the greater Baltimore metropolitan area to develop that talent pipeline. What would that mean to me? That would be a great opportunity for me to partner with other community-based organizations, other leaders in industry, government agencies. There's so much work to do. And the thing is that you have a lot of people who are working with their heart and their head to make a difference. And I think by raising the platform and raising the opportunity and challenging others, there's so much more we can do.
So let me turn to our private sector partners, and Calvin, I will throw you in on this one as well. So we'll start with Tanya. First of all, you're always looking for talent. Obviously, you heading up the global HR area. Talk a little bit about the talent that's needed in your industry and how workforce partners like Year Up or the Mayor's Office Employment Development can help develop that talent. What are some of the fundamental skill sets that are needed, and how do you assess whether or not somebody meets those skill sets?
It's a great question. So first, good evening. For those of you not familiar, Allegis Group and Aerotech are staffing and business services companies. So what we all do is we help workers find jobs, and we help companies find skilled workers. So we're not in one industry, so that's a bit of a tough question for me, but soft skills are so important. And so a lot of companies, if you're going to manufacture something, chances are you're going to learn a lot of those steps in that process wherever you work. So sometimes a lot of those hard skills unique to that job are going to be through on-the-job training. What we're really trying to do with folks is make sure they have those soft skills. And Year Up does a great job in training and developing those soft skills. You saw it in the process video, how to be on time, how to dress, how to be professional, how to show up, how to be diligent, how to give feedback, speak up for yourself, all of those things. So those soft skills are really important. I think programs like Year Up do a great job in training folks in that, and they can use those skills in any kind of field that they choose to go into across different industries.
So Brian, let me turn to you. Obviously, technology is such a booming industry sector. There's probably not any company in the world that doesn't deal with technology on a regular basis. So as a Chief Technology Officer at Brown Advisory, talk a little bit about how, what you need or what sort of needs that Brown has and what you look for in a prospective applicant or hire.
Sure, and I should say that we are a corporate sponsor, so we sponsor Year Up interns. Mike, our CEO, talked about we're about 700 people, and so he and I have this agreement that no matter what's going on, I'll always at least sponsor one intern, right? So we'll have someone come into the program. And I think of what I'd say is the skills and characteristics in 3 buckets. So the first bucket is the domain knowledge that they need to have, right? So if they're coming out of Europe and they've studied information technologies or help desk or information security or business operations, that's what I call that domain knowledge. And that's certainly important, but that's something that they're just in the beginning to learn, right? The layer below that is what I consider partly what Tanya said, which is the ability to work in a professional environment, right? The etiquette and the understanding of how to be a professional in a professional workplace. And then the other one I think about in that category is critical thinking, right? So in order to do that first level of the domain stuff, whether it's technology or whatever, they've got to be able to think about the problem they're working on, the issue, the project, what have you, and think through what's got to be done. And then the third bucket that I think about is really the foundational one, which is they got to have the drive, the motivation, the inspiration, the desire, the hungriness to want to succeed. And what I like about Year Up is, being on the board here, working with Roland and the team, we talk a lot about how these kids come through the pipeline, how you get in the door. And one of the things that Year Up does is really bring these opportunity youth in who have that first level component, which I think is the most important of the three. And then when you have that, you can move through the other layers.
So Scott, let me go to you, and then we'll come back to Calvin for a second. From a manufacturing basis and a global supply, obviously a little bit different than technology, but I'm sure technology is a part of it. How unique is it with McCormick and what you try to find among applicants?
So many of the same attributes you just mentioned. So certainly the ability to collaborate and work with a diverse group of people is very important. We mentioned earlier that many times a lot of the hard skills you need in terms of understanding our technology, our unique equipment, is on-the-job training. But then we put a lot of effort into something we call Journey to Excellence. And that's really giving people the tools and the skills to understand how to drive very methodical continuous improvement through a group effort, and how to drive improvement through the factory, eliminate losses, eliminate waste, and improve things. So that involves a lot of data analytics, real-time analysis, and making decisions as a team on how to drive things forward. So that team dynamic becomes really important to us in terms of somebody coming into the organization, being able to work across multiple disciplines and multiple diverse types of people in the organization. But it also provides what you see, and you talked about people who are, have a natural curiosity to want to do that, but also excel. It provides a path for people to move up into leadership roles, right, and become frontline supervisors. So then you start taking on a very different component, and that is a leadership component. It's something else we put a lot of emphasis around in giving people the opportunity to learn leadership skills and lead groups of people. And so that's like a natural progression that we look for as well.
So Calvin, BGE and Exelon has certainly been recognized for some of the incredible workforce programs that you've had and training programs that you've had for young people and people looking for a new career. Tell us, give us some insight from your perspective on this situation.
So I need to point out my colleagues, Michelle and Misha over here, who are very involved in the Year Up program. They reminded me tonight that we've been involved, partnered with Year Up for the last 10 years, and we've had over 275 interns, I believe. And so for those of you in business, you can understand retention and moving from intern to full-time is not easy, but we've had over 50% success rate in that. And I think it's a couple of things. One of the things we look at is the ability and willingness to learn and continuously learn. And what we found about the young people coming through Year Up is they have a willingness and a hunger to continuously to learn. And we can teach the job. We can train you, we can get you the job, but if you need to have that initial hunger and desire to want to better yourself and continue to grow. And that's what we found. And what we've also done at BGE and Exelon is that we identified that we are partnering with you through this process. It's not, okay, you're here, you go figure it out. And what we also know is that a lot of these young men and women who come into the organization have challenges. They do. And if you as an organization open the doors and welcome them in and do not provide some level of support initially, they won't stick. And that's the reality. We were talking tonight about when we had interns, making sure they had proper transportation to get to and from work on time. Yeah, we can teach the need to be on time, but if there's not public transportation, they don't own a car, you can tell them all they need to do, what time to show up, it's almost impossible to get there. So that's one. BGE, Exelon, we funded transportation opportunities. That's one. Two, we had interns, and this is not necessarily Year Up interns, but it wouldn't be, who would come to work and their colleagues would be around, they didn't have money for lunch. So you can imagine how that young person felt. So we made sure when we had interns, we would always have those departments provide daily lunches. Again, we didn't call it out, we just did, because you never want to separate. But we as employees, not you, we as employers have to be very cognizant and intentional about what we do to make that person. And I always sit back and say, we just converted a young man who was a Year Up intern for years for us. And that time frame was running out, and we were about to lose him. And everyone you talked to talked about how talented he was. He was probably better than a lot of our full-time IT people. One, he was younger and he knew what he was doing. And two, he was very personable in how he approached it, and he was quick. And I said, and we were about to lose him because he was a staff aug. So you know the new rules and labor laws, you can only have staff aug for 2 years. And he was about to roll off. And he was in school, he was trying to go to school, trying to better himself. I said, shame on us if we cannot find this young man a full-time job in this organization. And then as I pulled back the layer and talked to him, not only did we provide him a full-time job with benefits, I recognized that he would have been making more money than anyone in his family. So he was a predominantly breadwinner for his family. So going to the conversation, Joe, we're impacting lives. And if you sit back and take this as you're providing an internship, I think we as employers and companies are missing the opportunity to impact not only individual lives, but families. We're changing the course, the trajectory of these young men and women for years to come. And you don't need a thank you don't need a that a boy, but you just need to know what you're doing. And that's what we're doing at BG.
That was a great message. So Jason, I'm going to go off script. Since I've got the script, I can do that.
Apparently.
You've heard people say, have somebody show up, treat their colleagues with respect, give me a fair day worth of effort, and I can help train them to do the job. Talk about what, like you do at the Mayor's Office of Employment Development on those softer, what are known as career skills.
Yeah, thanks. I actually appreciate the question because as I was sitting here, I was deciding whether I wanted to jump in or not. And we're so lucky to have employers like the folks who are represented on this panel tonight because they do it right. So often we hear, young people get written off because of the zip code that they live in, because of the way they look. Often the term is, well, they're not job ready. That becomes sort of this term that allows folks to get dismissed. And while there are certainly things that every employer in every industry wants, like you got to show up to work, and you got to show up to work on time. And then there's always this good attitude thing, which is really important. I don't mean to minimize it, but what goes into a good attitude is not always something you just can put on a plate. And the thing that we try and do in our programs, and the thing that Year Up does so successfully, is in addition to the basics of dressing and being on time, is the confidence thing, is to help young people understand that you can have this opportunity, that you're worthy of it, that there's a career pathway for you there, and that if you have the supports in place, you can get through it. And what I really took away from what Calvin talked about just now is the extra mile that BG&E goes through to make sure that young person is welcome. And if they don't do it, what often happens is the young person is walking into an incredibly scary environment. I mean, imagine walking what it would be like to be 19 years old and walk into big old BG&E. You've heard about it your whole life. You're getting stuff in the mail. You see the trucks go by. You got to walk into that office as a 19-year-old and go up to some stranger, an adult who is older than you, and their head is down. They're busy working because Calvin's putting them to work, and you got to step up there and smile at them and be comfortable and say and convey that you belong here and you have a good attitude. So the thing that we don't talk enough about in workforce development, the thing that Year Up does so well, is to put the supports in place so that young people have the confidence to walk in, shake that hand, look them in the eye, and know that they belong. And look, we all experienced that tonight. I know I had it happen to me maybe 3 or 4 times where a young person who's in the Year Up program came up to me, without me, making the initial overture, introduced themselves, shook my hand, asked me what I do for a living. I mean, that's the thing that, I don't want to minimize it and say that's all we have to do, because there's more. There's the occupational skills, there's more to it. But it's those kinds of skills that if you're the employer, I mean, I'm the director of MOD, I'm wowed by it. Every time I go to a Year Up event, that is always happens to me. When I walk on the BCCC campus, young people walk up to me and shake my hand and ask me what I do for a living. So it's that kind of confidence and supports that we have to do. We try and do it in our programming through summer jobs and our youth opportunity centers, but it's really a service and a skill that's not talked about enough.
So Brian, let me turn to you. You mentioned obviously that part of your deal or your work with Mike is make sure you hire one person, at least one person in the Year Up program. You heard Calvin talk about some challenges, transportation being one. Talk about some of the obstacles or some of the challenges that you have in hiring the right person, or the obstacles that they're confronted with, and how you can work to overcome some of those areas.
Sure. So I think first you have to think about the firm and the culture that you're dealing with, because that always affects the approach for making the hiring decision. Brown Advisor is an investment financial manager, so we manage about $80 billion of capital for our clients, and they are high net worth individuals and their families, and then institutional investors, and it's a tough business, right? We have to make them happy, and part of making them happy is getting a good return on their money, and guess what? The market has a lot to do with that, and if you've been paying attention to the market, you know, it's tough to manage. So it's a tough business, very competitive, and we always look for the best talent that there is. And we have a traditional internship program that we have every summer, and we go recruit from the best schools in the country. And then we have Year Up, right? And how do you sort of merge those two phenomenon so that we can bring in Year Up hires to be successful in this type of environment they're in? We're very fast-paced, and it's very demanding. And the true answer is there's no silver bullet. A lot of things have to come together for us to make the hire. You know, the previous question that we answered around what skills do they need to have, well, that's part of it, right? And I always still believe the number one factor is their drive and determination, kind of that core being of who that person is. Then the other things come along with it. But then you've got to have the right match, right? So there's got to be the right match for the job. The timing's got to be right. In my case, as running the group, I've got to have the right budget, and all those types of things. But what we try and do is, similar to what Calvin was saying, during their time with us, while we're figuring out if we're going to make that hire, we want to give them the best opportunity to succeed, thinking about all the things that they need, all the things that we can do for them. And if we can do that, then we got the best chance for success. But I don't think there's any one thing that sort of makes the decision or makes it whether they get hired or not. So it's a bunch of factors, and I assume that's true for most people.
So Tanya, let me turn to you from an HR perspective. We heard Gerald earlier in his comments talk about that mindset that some people have, is that you've got to have that degree to be interviewed or that degree to be hired. Sometimes there's criticism that that's all people look at and don't look beyond that. In the HR world, are we actually looking beyond that, or what's going to take to empower HR professionals to look beyond, does that person have a degree?
It's a great question. I think it's starting to change, fortunately, because it's time to change. When you think about it, 50 years ago, there were certain professions where you got a degree. Gerald mentioned your medical practitioners. You want them to have some level of formal training. Some might argue teachers, but there's lots of jobs where you don't necessarily need that training. And I think for a while with our economy, it became that default of, well, if you have a 4-year degree, you go in this pile for consideration, and if you don't, you go in this pile and you're often not considered. I think with more and more companies taking chances and being aware of that opportunity divide, and also with the talent shortage that we have in certain industries, there's a willingness now, I think, to be more creative. A couple of big companies, Google, Netflix, Hilton hotel companies, they came out a couple months ago and they're like, you know what, for certain classes of jobs, we're gonna take out that 4-year degree requirement from all of our job descriptions. Because oftentimes it's there and you really don't need it. So do I think HR professionals are fully empowered yet? No, but I think we're on the right track. There was a study, and I won't quote it because I forget who did it, I think it was a Harvard Business School thing, but they took a geographic market and they pulled up all the job descriptions for executive assistants. And so executive assistants have to be detail-oriented, all those soft skills we talked about, and they've got to be organized, they have to have follow-through, they've got to have some tech skills with computers. There are certain skills that you need to actually perform a job as an executive assistant. Most of those skills don't require a four-year degree, but when you pulled all the job postings in that market, 65% of the job postings said four-year degree. But when they actually pulled the people in that market, in that job, who had their LinkedIn profile as I'm an executive assistant, only 19% actually had four-year degrees. So we put these barriers in at that posting point where they're not necessarily there. So I do think more and more companies are getting a bit more progressive, and they're trying to quantify what those skills are. I think part of the problem, though, is a lot of our resume sorting, and being at a staffing company, we have millions of resumes in our database, and there's automatic word sorting and auto match, all these applicant tracking systems. And so those four-year degrees, it's still a sort that a lot of companies use. It's still that trigger. I love things like the 7-minute resume, which I've seen, 7-second resume, which I've seen before. I think folks who don't have that four-year degree, we have to create opportunities for them to tell their story and show they actually have the skills. Because all those skills you need an executive assistant, you probably get those in college. You can also probably get those in life. And so we have to, as organizations, get more creative at allowing folks to tell their story and show they have both those soft and hard skills we've all talked about to perform. Some big companies are leading the way, but it is definitely still a default of that degree. And I think it's hurting companies when they try to really attract talent. So not empowered yet, but I think on the right path.
That's great.
I'll stop talking. That was a long answer, but I
That's
could
great.
talk for a
That's
while.
great. That's great.
Recruiting's what I do, so I could.
So Jason, continuing on that education pathway, we do have CEO of school systems, Sonia Sontalisa's here, so thank you very much for joining us. Talk a little bit about the coordination and collaboration that you see that needs to go between workforce development programs like yours or Years Up, as well as high school career technology education, all the way up to community college certifications, not necessarily, usually sub-baccalaureate degrees.
Yep. So first of all, I also want to recognize Dr. Santalisas. We're so lucky in Baltimore to have her and her great team and her vision. And among her many great qualities, one of them is that she's totally on board with having the education system and the workforce system connect. And again, that hasn't always been the case, but the data is really powerful. That if a young person, when they're leaving high school, if they're going to college or community college, you know, the data shows, I don't want to say every kid is fine, but the data shows that there's a good chance. But if the young person is not going to community college or college, and we have a lot of them in Baltimore City, the outcomes are not good. Any outcome you look at, whether you're looking at health outcomes, criminal justice activity, wages and income, and so we got to close that gap. We got to close that ditch, and we got to get into the schools. We got to work with the schools to make sure before they graduate that they know what their career pathways are and that they're getting exposure to it. And again, she's got a great team. We need you, right? I mean, I don't want to speak for the school system, but I will say for the workforce system, and I'm very confident from the educational system, we need you guys to help us to know exactly what the certifications are that you most value. Because whether we're doing the training on our end or we're doing the training in the career and technical education programs in the schools, the last thing we want to be doing is training young people for certifications that you no longer value. So we definitely need your partnership on that, and I promise you it will not be painless. It's just conversations and helping to inform what we do. We have a newer program that we started to address that gap. It's called Grads to Careers, not to be confused with the video. Year Up is a great partner with that. It's, again, to address that gap where young people were leaving high school without a plan. And so now to connect, we've got people who are in the school system who are going in and marketing programs like Year Up and 6 other programs. So that at the point of graduation, instead of saying, as you walk across the stage saying, I don't know what's next, now you know about 7 career pathways that you can choose, all of which are free to you as the young person. And it's showing to be really promising. We got to do more of it, because I don't want to wait 6 years for them to come to us in one of our one-stops.
Well, and obviously Year Up has a great partnership with BCCC and obviously works with the school system as well. Talk a little bit about it from your perspective.
Thank you, Don. Our partnership with Baltimore City Community College is the backbone for our success. Baltimore was the first co-located Year Up on a college campus. It was a pilot that was tested in 2010. There was some tweaking that was made, and in 2011, we relocated, or we moved to Baltimore City Community College, and we have not looked back since. It's scalable. As we grow, when I started in 2015, we served 80 students a year. We currently serve 240 students a year, and we have the potential to continue growing. We have the potential to tap into the continuing education organization to do the certification training. We have the ability to influence the students on Baltimore City Community College's campus that are looking at our students that are dressed in suit and ties every day, and they ask, how can that be me? Working with Baltimore City Schools, over half of our students are alumni or graduates of the Baltimore City public school system. And so we are looking for ways that we can create deeper pipelines and be able to work in partnership with Stan Wolf and the organization, the CTE group, PTech. We want to be able to share some of the knowledge that we've gained over the last 20 years in workforce development and soft skills, so that we can figure out how we can cascade that through the city and make this one of the best talent pools possible. Lastly, we work with a lot of community-based organizations like I Mentor. We have relationships with Center for Urban Families, Greater Baltimore Urban League. We're not a silo. We're out here really trying to collaborate, bring thought partners together to figure out how we can make a bigger impact on those 42,000 students that are in the Greater Baltimore metropolitan area. So there's a lot of work to do. We're looking to partner with you as well. And opportunities, if you have suggestions, if you see there's a need, call it out, let's name it. We can figure out how to fix it.
So the last question I'm asking some of the panelists before we open the floor for questions and ask you to be prepared for those is I'm going to turn to Calvin and also to Brian. We've heard all the great partnerships and the great work that BGE and Brown Advisory does to work with young people and to help bring address this gap in with Opportunity Youth. From a corporate culture perspective or from a corporate community obligation perspective, how does a corporation or how does a company sort of set that industry trend that this is what needs to be done? It's a part of your obligation of a company to fulfill this work.
That's a great question. I think that it's all about the firm's culture and its commitment to the community. So at Brown Advisory, I should know this because I'm CTO. So I think we have about 700 colleagues, and we track that they are on boards or volunteer in about 1,400 nonprofits or organizations in the areas where we do business, right, where we're located. So that's about 2 to 1. And so what that means is when you join our firm, one of the things that we talk about is that engagement. And after you're here for a little while, we kind of partner you up to go get involved in an organization that you have passion around, which is how I got involved in Year Up. And so it's just ingrained in how we do things to commit to the community. And so Year Up is a natural fit for us in that cultural perspective, because the thing that I would say about Year Up being on the board is that, I said this at a board meeting, one of the recent board meetings, I don't care what you hear about an organization or a mission or a goal, the bottom line, what happens. And these students come through this program and they come out at the other end with a career. They come out with a job, a wage, and they've lifted themselves out of a probably not good situation. That's a bottom line impact, every one of these individuals. And we can't hire, like I said, I always sponsor one intern every cohort, no matter what. We're 700 people, I can't hire on the scale of Bank of America. But every one of those that I hire, it is a real impact to their lives and their family. That's what really resonates to me. And the other thing is, the ones who we haven't been able to hire, we've kept track of them. They all have gone on and gotten jobs and been successful, which is, I think, is another aspect of Year Up. You don't have to always nail it in your particular internship, but there's avenues and other channels to get to that job. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Come.
So understand, who we are as Baltimore Gas and Electric. We serve 1.2 million customers across Central Maryland. We're a 203-year-old company, and we're not leaving. So, and no matter what you want, we're not leaving. So,
We usually want you around more.
that's right. That's right. So my perspective comes from an avenue of that we serve everyone, and we need to be representative of the communities that we serve. Period. And therefore, it does not matter where you live or what you do. I believe if you're going to be our customers, we need to represent every neighborhood that we reach into. So our commitment is one where we want you to know that we're involved and we're engaged in your particular community. So that's one. Two, then goes to how do we go about doing that? And we approach it from a standpoint that we recognize as BGE, being one of the largest employers in the area, we have a leadership responsibility. I've been CEO now for 5.5 years, and we've taken that very seriously. We know when we sit back and talk to our colleagues, as I'm vice chairman of Don's board of Greater Baltimore Committee, people ask, what is BGE going to do? And we take that very seriously. We do not take it lightly from a standpoint of whether we're giving dollars, whether we're committing to the board, whether we're giving of our time. To Brian's point, I have an expectation that every executive serves on at least 2 nonprofit boards. We give approximately $5.5 million a year to a variety of nonprofits, but more importantly, our employees volunteer over 26,000 hours because we want you to know we're part of the community. So for us, it's about leadership, and I think the greatest form of flattery is imitation. So if you see that something that we're doing you like, we want you to jump on board. And we also know that a lot of things that happen within the community wouldn't take place but for us taking that initial step. And that's what we take very seriously.
BG is such a great corporate partner in the city, but also we also fortunate in Baltimore to have so many other great companies who do great work and commit their time and resources. So thanks to all those. Let's open up the floor for any questions. There's a podium and a microphone in the back, or if you want to come up here, I'll walk over and give it to you. First in line, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Aaliyah Brockington. I am an intern at Year Up, cohort 17, and I have a question for the panel. As I work my way up to graduation, which is January 17th of 2020, what advice would you give a Year Up graduate starting out their career?
Tanya, I'm going to look to you at that one.
I was going to say, I think be bold, go for what you want. I think that we're often taught, especially as women sometimes, to kind of hold back and sort of wait. No one's going to offer you stuff in life. I think companies do try to do the right thing and engage their employees, but ultimately you own your career. So be deliberate, think about what you want. It's not about having always a 3 or a 5-year plan, but it's knowing kind of what is that ultimate career goal and then what are you working towards, and never lose sight of that, and kind of go for it. So I guess that's my best advice.
Brian?
I would add one. I always say this to our interns. So in my career, every chance I've had to learn something, and I put the effort to learn it. So if you're in your internship and you're doing a bunch of stuff and you see an opportunity, when I take advantage of the opportunity to learn that thing, it always pays off. And somewhere down the line, I'll be like, wow, I'm glad I learned that. And also true, every time I had an opportunity to learn something and I didn't take advantage of it, somewhere down the line I say, man, I wish I'd learned that. So just make the most of that time and learn everything you can.
Just to build on that, I would say that, coming out of school, many times you have one thought of what you think the future may look like or what your interests are, but honestly, you don't know until you get into the professional world. And And what I would tell you is there's no such thing as a very few times where you find people with a very straight line career. It looks very jagged in terms of what they've done and how they've gotten to where they've been. So be courageous about taking that unexpected opportunity that may not fit with what you think is the perfect path, right? Because it may open doors to things you've never thought about. And so I would say be courageous, be willing to take on things that, many times people have asked me to do things and I have no clue how I'm going to do that. But those have been the biggest learning opportunities, right? When you're put in the position to learn something brand new and embrace that, and it opens brand new doors for you. So that would be the other thing I would say is be courageous when that opportunity affronts you.
And how do you get those opportunities? I think it will be very few times in your career or your life where you will be allowed to call people up and to say, can I meet with you? Because people love to talk about themselves. So when you pick up the phone and say, I would love to know what you do. And as an intern, as a young employee, you are provided that latitude to get 15 minutes to a half hour just to talk and let them talk. And what you will find is that by taking the time and the initiative to do that, so many opportunities will be presented to you because you've taken the initiative just to listen. And to that conversation, that's where opportunities will open up. So never shy away from seeing something that looks like you want it, calling that executive, that whoever, and say, introducing yourself, can I get 15 minutes of your time? And you'll find yourself sitting in there for a half hour to an hour and just let them download.
I want to add one thing.
I was
Because
going
you
to ask
are,
Calvin if I could come to his office tomorrow, but
as being a member of the Alumni Association, there's a lot of benefits that our alumni have that they can take advantage of. And one is the network and continued professional development. And I would encourage you and all the other alumni in the audience, you are a family. You all have different learning experiences that you can share to help each other. And so I would encourage you, take advantage of that. We have activities every month, and we definitely have a big activity after graduation, but we tie in learning with our fun activities as well. So take advantage of it.
thank you for the question. Great.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nico Sanders, a proud Year Up board member. This question is to the panel as well as to you, Don. One of the things that we talked about earlier in our meeting that we discovered was that this is an organization that people should be running to give money to, should be running to be a part of. And part of that divide, if you will, or barrier has been the lack of interaction with the decision maker. Can I count on you, Don, and some of the other people from the panel that we can have access to some of your colleagues who are decision makers who might not necessarily be familiar with Year Up, but can understand that we're not giving them a handout. We're talking about an opportunity divide, and we're giving them the opportunity.
Certainly, we've worked with Roland and Scott over the years, and certainly would be willing to do that. And I think you're actually on the list for me to have a presentation at the GBC board meeting sometime in the near future, as soon as we can work that out. So that certainly will certainly provide that access as well.
Great.
I didn't expect that one coming to me. I don't know where that came from.
You handled it well.
Hi, good evening. My name is Randall. I am a recent board member of Year Up, and I thank all of you all for being here today and taking your time out and giving us an opportunity to talk to you. I have just a general question that I want to throw out at you. Baltimore City and Baltimore County are basically brothers and sisters. We were talking about partnerships here. And so I have a general question as to whether you have an opinion as to whether Baltimore City government and Baltimore County government should work together as a partner. And if you do have that opinion, do you believe that a partnership between the two governments would realize an economic benefit to one or the other or both?
Yeah. So if I can, Don, prior to this meeting, I was in a discussion with Baltimore County Executive Johnny Olszewski. and this was one of the issues that we discussed. So you would think I planted this to you, but I did not. There's tremendous amount of synergies. Our children and our communities don't see a line, and they're going back and forth on a regular basis, whether it's to school, to work. Many county residents, I'm a county resident, but I work in the city, and vice versa. The opportunity comes now, the bigger question that you're hearing so much about is, should the city and the county merge in some form of larger government? I don't think that's in the short-term horizon, because we have to show that we can work regionally, collectively and cohesively first, and do it but to your direct question, are there opportunities for our children? Yes, because when you look at the demographics of Baltimore County School, many people think that Baltimore County is this affluent area. It does have affluent areas, but as a whole, the county demographics are changing, and Johnny O shared that in stark contrast today. What happens is, because they have never been transparent, meaning the county, with their needs, many businesses, foundations, and nonprofits were not focused on them. And he's peeling back the covers to show we do have a need. And I think, to your direct question, we will have many more opportunities to partner, one, because they're asking, and two, because the need is there.
Just recently, we hosted a welcome reception for Dr. McCurdy, new president of Baltimore City Community College, and there was a lot of synergy and collaboration already that's been discussed between Community College of Baltimore County and Baltimore City Community College. So I think that's just the beginning of things like that happening.
And I would just say on the workforce, actually, following Calvin's lead, I had lunch today with my counterpart in Baltimore County. We're going to get together again next week. I totally agree that if you're a resident, you want to work. We all like to work close to our home, but if the right opportunity, you're going to go where the job is. And we certainly do not, we don't really worry about the lines in terms of recruiting businesses for the folks that we're trying to serve. Our centers are not limited to Baltimore City residents. So we have 30,000 people who come through our centers each year. Some of them are Baltimore County residents as well, or other county residents. And even with a program like YouthWorks that serves young people as young as 14, we have a considerable number of jobs that they travel to in the county as far as Bowie.
Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Gerald. I am also a board member. As you can notice, there's a theme here. But one of the questions that we wanted to bring up is the transportation has been a problem in Baltimore City, and there's been several occasions trying to bring railways or stops through the city on their way, the new bullet train that they're looking at from DC to New York. And you look at these challenges and you just wonder, should businesses try to influence local government to help in that? Because that is a problem for even bringing talent to the city. And how much is being considered for that? Because if you look at the larger cities, we have rapid transit all through the city.
I think, representing the business community, I can say that yes, it is a very top priority of the business community. We've been very active in transportation for a number of years. It is particularly important now because we see two tremendous employment hubs being created, one being at Port Covington, the other being at Trade Point Atlantic, just in Baltimore County. We need to make sure that we have access and ways to provide people with access to those employments. There's tremendous opportunities that are there for the types of jobs we've been talking about, but there really has not been a system built for those types of employment hubs. So I think that that's where we're going to see a lot of focus, not necessarily getting the huge projects because they take for years and decades to be built, but making sure that we can get that last mile for people from the last point of transit to the place of employment, or getting people to these employment hubs that are so important in the next decade.
And I think our approach needs to change. And I'll say the why. Don has been intimately involved in whether it's a red line, purple, whatever it may be, whatever color it was, in getting it done. But we can no longer depend on the federal government and the state government. And where I think our opportunity as local businesses is to sit back and say, if you have job opportunities in Trade Point Atlantic, if you had job opportunities in Port Covington or wherever, and those are the hubs, what can we do as a business community to rally around and say, we're going to invest in providing that last mile? And we're just going to say, we need to do it. And then what happens, Gerald and I were talking about this earlier, Year Up has been involved in those type of activities all the time, but it needs to be a collective understanding that it has to get done. And I think that's where our opportunity lies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very important issue, and I think one where it's going to be dominant for the next couple of years.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Farida Shahid. I'm a Year Up alumni. I graduated in 2018. Cohort 14 is my alumni partner guiding me here. My question for you today is, what kind of opportunities would you recommend for a Year Up alumni that are alum that has not gained a college degree or does not want to gain a college degree? So they want to continue their professional development, but a college degree is not on their horizon for a personal choice.
You want to jump
I think if you're, depending if you're working with a big company, a lot of big companies will have tuition reimbursement programs where you can take a course. You don't have to get a degree, but if there's an area of study that's always interested you, to be able to take a course in that, explore it a little bit. There's also tons of great online content that I find a lot of big companies will have sort of online catalogs of things. So a lot of it is that self-development, and I think it's really following your passions of what you're interested in. I think, you said it really well a while ago. When you're learning something new, there is that excitement and that energy. And so it's not about necessarily getting a degree or going down that path, but I think it's always striving to learn something new. I'm a single mom with 2 kids and a big job, and I don't always have time to sit down and read that book I want to, but I'll always find 15 minutes to watch a TED Talk on a topic I find interesting. So again, a lot of that new sort of micro-learning, just to keep your brain active and learning things that you're interested in, whether it leads you down a path that excites you and you decide to get a career. I think we said it well too, that you don't always know where you're going, but you know the kind of life that you want to have, and so it could just be exploring different things for you.
Thank you.
And the only thing I would add to that is, there's also lots of opportunities at community colleges in terms of certificate programs. And so adding another certification to your portfolio makes you more competitive in the workforce. Something to consider.
And more likely to get picked up by that pesky automated resume sorting, so.
And I will add one more thing. Some organizations have continuing education. IBM had something called Think 40. And so we were encouraged to learn 40 hours through the course of the year. So take advantage of what those companies are offering to ensure that you're continuing learning, because what you know today is going to be outdated in 6 months.
So I'll just add into there and say, if you ever want a career in manufacturing, distribution, great opportunities, and places like, it's not just McCormick. There's a lot of places in the Baltimore County, Baltimore City area where people can build careers in manufacturing. And they also usually have great continuing education programs. So if you do want to continue on and advance, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bert Mayo. I'm a current student with Year Up, interning at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Thank you. My question is directed to Tanya Axenson. So you mentioned that you're in HR. So how can you help your organization and other organizations hire young adults from Year Up?
So we actually do use Year Up a lot, which is good. I think across the organization, not quite the 275 that Calvin shared, but we've hired definitely a couple hundred, and not only internally. So we have some of our operating companies, Tech Systems does IT work. We've hired probably 3 or 4 dozen in there directly, and we place dozens more at clients. I think it's educating our clients on this. And what's great about Year Up is, that 7-second resume thing, you have a chance for an individual to tell their story. What's so great about Year Up is you have an organization like Year Up behind you helping to tell that story and advocating the program to businesses. So I think we can all do a better job of making sure that we're educating other employees in the area about how effective the Year Up program is and how great the interns coming out of that program can be. So definitely opportunities for all of us, I think, to who are believers in the program to market it and brand it more. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Misha Brown, and I'm with Exelon. And my question is for the panelists that have Year Up interns. So we've talked a lot about the students. I oversee all the Exelon interns, and where we, I think, stumble sometimes to implement is not with the student, it's actually with the first line supervisor who may feel saddled with this student that they are so different from and don't necessarily have the proper training to mentor and lead and teach and keep busy these interns. So what are you guys doing to push the Year Up message down? And what advice do you have for me who has to interact with these managers to kind of bring them up and bring them on, drink the Kool-Aid and come on board? Take the time.
We'll exclude Calvin from this question.
No, we will not.
Scott, you want to take that on? Or Tanya, somebody?
Good.
So, I think it depends on the organization. I meet with whoever's with us, I meet with them at least every 2 weeks. I have a one-on-one. And then our Chief Information Security Officer, obviously a very senior person, also meets with them. So I guess what I'm saying is one thing is you got to have leadership engaged, right? And so there's going to be that line manager who the intern may be reporting to, but if you get the leadership engaged, believing and paying attention, then I think that's one thing that can certainly go, can help with that. And I'm not saying by any means it's perfect. I mean, if you ask our interns, they may say they'd like this to be better, that to be better, but that's certainly one thing I think has helped us. So.
And Misha, I think it's getting those leaders very clear on the messaging, and this should be true for managers, whether they're managing a Year Up intern or any other hire. I think it's all about that inclusive leadership. And so one thing that we're working on really hard, and we don't have the answer yet, but is really taking anyone who's a supervisor at Aerotech and Allegis and making sure that we give them the tools they need to be an inclusive leader. Because it's easy to develop and engage with someone who looks like you and talks like you and thinks like you. It's another thing to really get to know and develop someone who might think differently than you or look differently than you. And so we're really trying to make sure that all of our leaders have that capability, whether they're managing a Year Up intern or they're managing anyone else. And I think having executive sponsorship that's driving that messaging along with an awareness of the Year Up program would probably be helpful.
So we don't have a Year Up internship program.
Why not?
Got room for that.
I got brought in tonight to along with our HR colleague. Threw me on the panel.
You have his
Thanks,
contact
Tracy.
information?
But I do want to speak to it. So we do have a very robust internship program. And so, but what I will tell you is that I think to have it doesn't matter what the internship program is, they need to have clear mentors in the business. They need to have a manager. They need to have a clear deliverable on what they're going to do while they're doing their internship. And so we make sure all of our interns have that. And then what we also do before they depart, we actually have an internship day where they present out back to our leadership team what it is they did while they were there, what they learned, how they contribute. And what we're using that for, quite honestly, we are identifying future hires who we'll bring into our supply chain program. So, but it has to be very robust, right? You can't just bring somebody in and say, well, you're an intern. There needs to be a really solid program behind it if they're going to be successful and they're going to succeed.
Myasha, if you give me your card at the end of tonight, a couple years ago, the Greater Baltimore Committee, Education and Workforce Committee put together a book on effective internships because we heard the same problem. Employers were wondering, how do we make this as effective for us and for the intern that we have? So I'll be glad to share some of their recommendations and concepts with you as well.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think we're going to do some quick rapid fire questions because I think we have to come to an end here.
Good evening. My name is Ghislaine Umulisa. I just graduated from Year Up in July, and I was interning at Verizon Media as a system engineer, and I am currently looking for employment. So my question is, some of us, we are not from America. Like me, I'm from Rwanda, and I've only been in America for a few years. And on our resumes, we have very few things from America. My question is, are companies doing enough to teach about diversity so that people like me are not limited to opportunities because of where we are from, or low opportunities to learn more? Like, what are companies doing to include diversity for people who are like me, who are open to learning and growing?
Diversity is obviously a huge issue for companies these days. Tanya, you want to just talk about whether or not what can be done or what is being done?
I think most inclusion programs, I think, kind of look at everything, including sort of kind of having diversity in where folks are from. I think it's important to continue to kind of train again our hiring managers. Like, you're looking for skills, right? So as long as the applicant in front of you has those skills, again, it's that opportunity to kind of tell your story, and you're capable of doing X, Y, and Z, and their job description requires X, Y, and Z, and so kind of finding that marriage between the two. I think sometimes it's hard with some folks with international background. I know work visas and things can be scary sometimes for HR folks who don't have kind of enough background in that. I think we do a better job as companies of making sure that folks know how to guide, applicants sort of through that process to make sure we're looking at all of our candidates. But it's definitely a tricky area sometimes.
I would concur with what she's saying, and I would also say, don't apologize. Own your space, own your education, own your learning, and be okay with the differences that you have. Because a lot of times what I find is that when we have international individuals apply, they come across as apologizing for the lack of X or Y. But you gotta own your space and be able to, and be comfortable with articulating the vision of what you do, what you can do and what you do, and what you bring to the table. So when you come in from that background and then you're hesitant or shy about it, you're not giving yourself the full opportunity to live up to what you can deliver. Okay.
Great advice. Good. Thank you.
That was such a great question. We can pretty much end there. It's a wonderful question. My name is Ian Matthew Clayton. I lead the talent acquisition function at Johns Hopkins University. And so I'm proud that Johns Hopkins University, we are a proud supporter of the Year Up program. We have primarily in the IT space. However, if you go on our website right now, we probably have 800 jobs. So we have a tremendous amount of diverse jobs. And I just want to try to figure out and to work with Year Up, like, how could we work together to figure out roles that are not necessarily IT, and to help us solve some of our problems around, like, our research roles. And these roles don't necessarily need a 4-year degree, but we're challenged with the training and the preparation of people to sort of like step into those roles.
Great question. And we have Scott, we have Larry. Scott is waving his hand. We have Terrence in the back. We would love to talk to you, find out what those pain points are and how we can address them. And also we have sometimes... we just grew the market, thank you. But one of the things we can do is not all jobs require our 6 and 6 model. So there may be some things that we can do working with Grads of Life or our I3 program that we can find that talent and help create that pipeline for you. So I would love to talk with you afterwards, and Scott, Terrence, or we have a number of Larry that would be helpful. Look forward to talking with you.
Okay,
you get bombarded later.
Yeah. I got excited on that question. Thank you.
Last question.
I'm going to try to go fast because I'm last and I can tell people when to get out of here. But this is my first time coming here, and it's been really enlightening, and I appreciate it. I'm Michelle Ferrer. I work at Exelon also. I lead a group called IT, Enterprise-Wide Solutions. And the whole time I've been listening tonight, we've been talking a lot about, so it's a two-part question, but I'll be quick, the upside for the interns and the talent, which is obviously the reason we're here. But I think we have a lot of disruptors in our industry, if we look in the energy industry and technology. And I think we know that innovation is needed to succeed. So I'd be curious if any of the panel has thoughts on the upside to the company of having talent from a completely different path and perspective, and not that traditional trajectory through college, and what it does for a company. And then second, what actionable things, the opening remarks were about why does one person say yes and one person say no? What can we do as leaders to influence other leaders that are making these decisions that are actionable, so they also recognize that upside?
Those were, I may need a glass of wine. This is a meaty question for the last one. I'll try to take the first part a little bit, just diversity of thought. Like, we've talked about diversity a bit, and people think of it as, race and gender. It's diversity of thought. So I love when you get people from different backgrounds in a room, because they're all going to look at things the different way. So having folks on your team who don't have that traditional 4-year degree, who didn't grow up in America, who don't see things the same way, there's tons of studies that show the more diverse a group is, the more innovative they are, and the higher they perform. And so I think there definitely is, no one can really dispute anymore the business case for diversity on work teams. And so I think reminding leaders of that. But you're gonna look at things in a different way based on your background and your perspectives. And I think that diversity of thought is really a huge benefit for the companies.
Yeah, and we see that. So every graduate that's with us now is really successful. And they are having real bottom line impact in all the jobs that they're doing. And I can think of, story after story of things they've done. And, you just have to believe that their background, right, their perspective, they're bringing to the table just like anyone else. And so we're better for it, which I think is the point you're making, which is diversity really does add value to the bottom line.
So I'll take the last part. What can we do to influence leaders to say yes? I would say all of you here, by you taking the time to come out tonight, whether you're on the Year Up board or you're leading HR, you're leading an organization, you're committed to doing something, but we can't be shy about it. We cannot continue to operate in our silo. We have to be bold about stepping out and encouraging our colleagues to be leaders in this area and to say that we are going to work. The person who came from Johns Hopkins said, look, I have a need. And we have to say that, and we have to be willing to partner with organizations like Year Up, iMentor, and others to say we can do more because we want to be part of the renaissance of Baltimore. And until we claim that and tell others they don't have a choice but to come along, and if they don't come along, move along because we don't have time for the conversation, that's what's going to drive the yes. And we have to be just very intentional and very bold about that effort.
Well, for about the last hour and 10 minutes or so, we have had the good fortune of being educated and advised by 6 tremendous individuals who care so much about the city and care so much about young people and how we bring about change in the workforce and how we have this economic impact that we need for Opportunity Youth. So please join me in thanking all these individuals for the great job.